Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm your host Newsome and we're here for UFC Vegas 41, Paulo Costa versus Marvin Vettori. As you can see, we've got a brand new setup for the podcast moving forward. We've got the camera, we've got the microphone, we've got the green screen behind me, all the good stuff. So I hope you enjoy the developments and improvements to what we're going to be bringing moving forwards. Now, with the new style of podcast, we're also going to have a slightly different format as well. So we're going to try and save time for you guys, get straight into the fights, get straight into the breakdowns, and just tell you who I think is going to win the fight. The predictions and analysis will all remain the same. So with that being said, we're going to jump straight into the main event. Like I said, we've got Paulo Costa versus Marvin Vettori, and it's a fight at the top of the middleweight division. Both fighters coming off a loss to the current champion, Israel Adesanya. I really like this fight. I think it's really clear from Marvin Vettori's side what he's got to do. Now, before I quickly get into that, I feel that there's a lot of talk around Paulo Costa and how he handled that loss to Israel Adesanya. Personally, I do think there's definitely something in that. You know, he didn't handle the loss very well. It may have been more due to what Israel Adesanya did after the fight. Instantly after the fight, as Paulo Costa was knocked out. Obviously, if you don't know, go back and watch the fight. But Paulo Costa didn't handle that fight very well at all. Didn't handle the loss very well. It was his first loss. But if we are talking narratives, you've got to look onto Marvin Vettori's side as well, because it was only this morning I woke up to Marvin Vettori saying that Israel Adesanya was better nowhere than him in their last fight, when Israel Adesanya beat him 50-45 on all three scorecards. So if you are taking narrative into account when you're analysing this fight, then, you know, don't be biased with your narrative, because there's definitely negatives on both sides. Personally, I'm not a narrative type of person. I feel from Marvin Vettori's side, he's got to get his wrestling going in this fight. I think that if he comes out there and tries to point fight with Paulo Costa's going to land on him. Maybe the volume will be on Vettori's side, but Costa will land hard. And once Costa starts landing hard, you're going to be in for a long night, or maybe a short night if it catches you on the chin and knocks you unconscious. Vettori's got to get the wrestling going early, avoid the big power from Paulo Costa. And also, one of the slight deficiencies or slight question marks from Paulo Costa is the cardio. What's he going to look like if this gets into round 4 and round 5? If Vettori wrestles early in this fight, then he could potentially get Costa tired moving later down the fight. But personally, I like Paulo Costa in this fight. I think the power from a finishing perspective, Paulo Costa is definitely the more likely fighter to finish the fight. And I think people forget that Paulo Costa is a BJJ black belt as well. So if Vettori does take Costa down, I don't think it's going to be an instant whitewash. I think Costa will be able to get back up to his feet. And I do feel that Vettori's point striking style, opposed to just having that raw knockout power, is going to play into the hands of Costa, who should be able to land on him more frequently. Again, I feel like recency bias is baked into the betting line, pushing Paulo Costa as an underdog. I think that Paulo Costa is a solid fighter on the feet, on the floor, with his grappling, with his wrestling. I do feel that he's going to have advantages in this fight, more finishing upside, and that's why I'm picking Paulo Costa to win this fight. Now, moving into the co-main event, we've got Grant Dawson versus Ricky Glenn. Grant Dawson is a big favourite in this fight at -330. I do believe he's the big favourite for a reason. Ricky Glenn surprised me a lot last time out against Joaquim Silva, and I think he surprised a lot of people as well with that big knockout. But with Grant Dawson, it's going to be trickier, because Dawson's going to be looking for the wrestling. He's a solid wrestler, good completion rate as well. If he doesn't complete, it's good chain wrestling, pushing his opponents back to the cage and getting them down to the mat, and then just working from top position where his topside jiu-jitsu is good as well. Ricky Glenn's not the easiest fighter to take down, so I don't think it's going to be as simple as Dawson shoots in for the first takedown, takes him down, and then that's job done. I do think that Glenn is going to do the good fundamental work in regards to getting underhooks, spreading the base out on the cage and just defending the takedown. But sooner rather than later, Grant Dawson will become more relentless. I think he gets the takedowns he needs to win this fight. I don't think Ricky Glenn's going to be much danger off his back with his defensive jiu-jitsu, throwing submissions up. And even if he does throw a triangle up or an armbar, I think Grant Dawson is more than capable of dealing with those type of submissions whilst he's on top. And he's also a good transitioner on the mat, passing guard and getting to where he needs to be. Like I said, I think the fight's going to be won and lost in regards to the wrestling and the top side control, and that all falls into the favour of Grant Dawson. There's a reason he's a big favourite. I'm picking Grant Dawson to win this fight. And then in the next fight, we've got Jessica Rose Clark versus Joselyne Edwards. I actually think this is going to be a decent fight as well. And I also think it's going to be a fight from Jessica Rose Clark's perspective. I think it's going to look a lot like her fight with Panikianzad, which she lost due to just being slightly out-volumed across the 3 rounds. So with Jessica Rose Clark, I think she's definitely more well-rounded. She will look for takedowns more than what Edwards will, but I feel that Edwards is going to have a striking advantage in regards to speed, accuracy, and just landing sheer volume across all 3 rounds, and that should be the difference in this fight. I think Rose Clark is definitely going to keep this fight competitive. I think it's not going to be a whitewash from Edwards' perspective. The fight, each round, I think is going to be relatively close, but when you're looking for which fighter is just going to slightly edge at least 2 out of those 3 rounds, like I said, I think the fight is going to be won and lost on the feet, and the speed and the striking technique from Edwards, I think, is going to be just enough to, like I say, just out-volume Jessica Rose Clark over the 3 rounds. For those reasons, I'm picking Joselyne Edwards to win this fight. And then in the next fight, we've got Negumereanu versus Ike Villanueva. And Negumereanu is an interesting fighter. Obviously, he came into the UFC. He looked, a little bit questionable. There were red flags on his cardio and obviously just his all-round game. But in his last fight, he looked better than he'd looked before. It looked like he'd improved his volume. His technique looked improved as well. He was looking decent in regards to his wrestling. And then from Ike Villanueva's perspective, again, he's a fighter that started a little bit sketchy in the UFC, but he started to look a little bit better himself. But the one problem I've got with Ike Villanueva is the volume. Landing sheer volume over 3 rounds is just not something that he's really got to grips with yet. And I feel that this fight could simply just come down to who outstrikes the other fighter. Now, from Ike Villanueva's perspective, I don't think he's got the wrestling and the takedown game to really start pushing a pace on Negumereanu. I don't think he's going to be able to take Negumereanu down. I do think Ike Villanueva is reliant on being efficient on the feet, and unfortunately I feel that Negumereanu is the more efficient striker, is the fighter that's likely going to land more volume. I think he's got the better cardio. I think his technique's better on the feet as well. When you're looking from a power perspective, I think Villanueva does have an edge in the power, so he could catch Negumereanu and knock him out. But ultimately, again, I just see Negumereanu just landing the more strikes on Ike Villanueva. So the longer the fight goes on, the more likely it is that Negumereanu's pulling away on the scorecards. And also, if you are looking for a finishing upside, like I said, I know Villanueva's got power, but if Negumereanu's landing accumulation of volume, then that could ultimately end up becoming a stoppage the longer the fight goes on, maybe a late stoppage. But I do have Negumereanu winning this fight. And then in the next fight, we've got Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres versus Seung Woo Choi. I really like Seung Woo Choi as a fighter. Sting's his nickname, and that's exactly what happens when he hits you on the chin. The dude is a technical striker. He's really efficient. He doesn't waste strikes. His accuracy is really good as well. And he's got power in his combinations. And then again, that's another thing. Not only does he land volume, but he throws in combinations. So if the first or the second punch is blocked, then he'll hit you with a third punch or a fourth punch. He'll mix in kicks as well. I think he's a really difficult fighter to beat, and I think he's going to cause a lot of fighters problems at this level in the UFC. Now, I really like Bruce Leroy as well. I think he's a good fighter. Again, he's quick. He's in and out of the pocket really well, sliding in and out of range. He's very well-rounded, and obviously he's got a lot of experience. He's been in the UFC for years. But like I said, I feel that for Caceres to really do well in this fight, he's got to land regularly on Seung Woo Choi. I don't think he's going to be able to take Choi down. Choi's dealt with much better wrestlers. He's got a good takedown defense and a good get-up game as well. So I feel like this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet. And like I say, for Caceres to win that type of fight, he's got to get into the pocket. He's got to land accumulation of volume, put combinations together and just outpoint Choi. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Choi's the better striker with more power, better combinations, better footwork, better movement. And I think he's quicker as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Seung Woo Choi to win this fight. And then in the next fight, we've got Dwight Grant versus Francisco Trinaldo. Again, a really good fight. Dwight Grant comes in this fight with a lot of power. He does throw 2 to 3 punch combinations as well. So he's not just a one-hitter-quitter type of fighter. And again, Dwight Grant in the first rounds, in every single one of his fights, he's dangerous. He's got speed, he's got power, but the one issue that I do have with Dwight Grant is he does fade the longer the fight goes on, and he does appear to be the type of fighter that if he can't get you out in the early stages of the first round or in the first round, he will just start lacking a little bit of confidence from that point moving forwards. And from Francisco Trinaldo's perspective, he's never been knocked out. So it's hard to say that Dwight Grant's going to go into this fight looking to knock Trinaldo out. Trinaldo up at welterweight as well, which is his new weight class. He's not having that depleted weight cut where his chin's going to look a little bit sketchy, where his durability might be a bit of a question mark. He got hit hard a few times by Muslim Salikov, who is one of the hardest hitters in the division when he connects. So I don't think that Dwight Grant is going to go out there and land something on Trinaldo that's going to knock him out. Dwight Grant might take round one if he drops him, but I think Trinaldo's experience, and like I say, you look at the fight with Trinaldo and Salikov, Trinaldo looked really, really good against a very experienced kickboxer, and the difference between Salikov's technical ability on the feet and Dwight Grant's is just unparalleled. So I think that Trinaldo's going to come into this fight. Again, I think he's going to land volume. He might even be able to get takedowns in this fight. We saw Dwight Grant taken down a few times in his last fight. He can be controlled when on top. Trinaldo's an absolute beast on top, laying heavy on you. Good jiu-jitsu, and like I said, his kickboxing is really good as well, really aggressive. Even if he gets hit hard, he'll still come forwards, and I think it's got all the traits of a fighter that is able to get at Dwight Grant. I think Trinaldo could finish this fight, but if he doesn't, then I do think he's going to win 2 out of 3 rounds at the very least. I'm picking Francisco Trinaldo to win this fight. And then in the next fight, we've got Livinha Souza versus Randa Markos. Now, this is a fight between 2 women that are both on down points in the career. Randa Markos has lost the last 4 fights. Livinha Souza came into the UFC with a ton of hype, and ultimately that hasn't materialized into what she's become right now. So I think it's a very interesting fight, and it's a fight that both women need to win. For whoever loses, it could be one of those walking paper type of losses where unfortunately they do lose the job in the UFC and get cut. I've given Randa Markos the benefit of the doubt quite a lot in the last few fights in the UFC. I've said that, you know, she's a better fighter than what she's portraying, and in all fairness to her, she is losing against really good fighters, but I do think there's a point now where she is starting to look declined, she's starting to look regressed, the record isn't that great. I think in this fight she has to get takedowns against Livinha Souza, but Souza's not easy to take down. She can get back up to her feet as well. She's a BJJ black belt. And I think on the feet, Souza's just more aggressive, the more aggressive striker, the more efficient striker. The fight's going to be really close, and it's one of those types of fights where it's probably going to go to a split decision. And with how the judges are scoring the fights nowadays, you know, who knows at that point. But I think it's going to be a really close fight. I think it's going to be a complete mixed martial arts fight as well. We are going to see wrestling, we are going to see grappling, we are going to see striking. But ultimately, I think the striking is going to play the bigger moment. It's going to have the bigger moments in this fight, play the bigger factor, and therefore the fight is more likely to be won and lost via the striking on the feet. And that's where I see Livinha Souza just being slightly more efficient, slightly more aggressive, looking like she's wanting to finish the fight a little bit more, which is something that judges really like. For those reasons, I'm picking Livinha Souza to win this fight. Then in the next fight, we've got Jeff Molina versus Daniel Lacerda. Now, Daniel Lacerda, new to the UFC. I think this guy is going to be exciting. I think a lot of people are going to really like watching him fight inside the cage. The guy's crazy. He comes out fast at 100 miles an hour. He's got combinations with his hands. He throws high kicks, spin attacks as well. But then he's got a decent ground game when he's on top, a good submission game. He's got submissions off his back as well. I think Jeff Molina in this fight, I really like Jeff Molina, but I think he's got his work cut out for him for sure. However, I do feel that Jeff Molina is the slightly more well-rounded fighter in regards to being the more skilled fighter in the different disciplines of mixed martial arts. I think he's a better striker than Lacerda for sure. I think his wrestling should be able to cope with the wrestling of Lacerda. If the fight hits the mat, Lacerda, for as good as he is offensively, he isn't quite as good defensively. You can sweep him, reverse him, get on top. And this is where I think Jeff Molina is going to have the advantage in this fight, because he's just, for me, he's got the better level of competition. He's fought the better level of fighters, and that's going to set him up well in the UFC. I think Molina is going to be able to keep this fight on the feet for the most part. Again, I do foresee some wrestling and grappling, but I think the work on the feet is definitely going to play a bigger factor in this fight, and that's where I think Jeff Molina's better. I think moving forwards as well, The deeper we go into this fight, I do question what Lacerda's cardio is going to look like, because it's something that's a bit of a red flag. We've not really seen it, but with how fast he starts his fights, I'd be really surprised if he can keep that pace going 3 rounds, where we know Jeff Molina can keep that pace. I like his accumulation of volume. Again, possibly live for a late stoppage in this fight, but if not, I do see him winning at least 2 out of the 3 rounds. I think Jeff Molina is going to win this fight. Then in the next fight, we've got Jung Park versus Gregory Rodrigues. So again, a really good fight. Jung Park, he's very well-rounded. His striking is very quick, it's clean, it's accurate. He doesn't necessarily load up on his strikes, so it is more of accumulation of volume with Jung Park. His wrestling is something he's really worked on in his last few fights. Really good at getting in on the single legs, taking his fighter down, and then working on top. And in his last few fights where he's managed to get on top and have a level of control down there, he's really lit his opponent up with ground and pound, caused a lot of blood to be spurted out on the cage, really cut his opponents up. So Jung Park can be dangerous, but Gregory Rodrigues is a beast in my opinion. His striking is come on so much. His base, his background is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, really dangerous on the mat, lays heavy on top, good submissions, good positioning, good control. But his striking has come on so much, and it's no surprise that it's come on so much when he's been training at Sanford MMA with Henry Hooft. So it's got to the point now with Gregory Rodrigues where he's probably more dangerous as a striker than he is as a grappler, where, you know, he started as a grappler. So Jung Park's got to be really careful in this fight. I do think Park has got the speed advantage for sure in this fight, but I do think that's his only advantage. I think the power, the combinations, the cleanness and the crispness of the striking and the boxing from Rodrigues is just solid. He can strike moving backwards as well, a good check left hook. He's got kicks, and then like I say, if Jung Park actually decides that Rodrigues is a little bit too much for him on the feet and decides to take Rodrigues down, then he's dealing with a high-level BJJ black belt on the mat. So this is where I feel that Jung Park's going to come a little bit unstuck in this fight, because if he can't get his striking going, he's going to either have to lose a striking battle or resort to trying to take the fight down to the mat, where he's going to be entering the world of a BJJ black belt. So I think Gregory Rodrigues stylistically has got a good fight ahead of him. I'm picking Gregory Rodrigues to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Tabatha Ricci versus the newcomer Maria Oliveira. Now, some of you may recognize Maria Oliveira from the Dana White Contender Series Brazil, where Marina Rodrigues lit her up so badly that Oliveira just didn't want anymore. She wasn't knocked out, she wasn't rocked or wobbled, she just had had enough of the elbows and the knees from Marina Rodrigues, and ultimately told the ref she didn't want anymore and to stop the fight. And since that fight, she has gone 2-0, but one of those is 0-1-0 opponent, the other opponent 0-0, so a debutant. So it's really surprising that she's in the UFC. She does look like a decent striker, in all fairness, from a Muay Thai perspective. I think Marina Rodrigues was just so much better than her in that fight that made her look a little less experienced in the striking. But her hero's Anderson Silva, she tries to replicate his style. And like I say, she can strike, but again, I'm just not sure at what level that's going to be. I think in this fight with Tabatha Ricci, in regards to the striking, I think the striking is going to be very close, maybe a slight edge to Oliveira, but that's not Tabatha Ricci's game. Tabatha Ricci is a wrestler, a topside grappler, and ultimately I think that's going to be the difference in this fight. I think Tabatha Ricci is going to secure takedowns. I think she's going to, at the start, she's obviously going to have to stand striking with Oliveira, but again, I don't think it's going to be a whitewash on the feet at all. But what it is going to do is allow Tabatha Ricci to close the distance, get in on a single leg, a double leg, or a body lock, and look for a trip to get her down to the mat. And once Oliveira has been taken down and settled, her takedown defense is okay. She can use initial scrambles, but once her back has been settled on the mat, she's just non-existent from that point. There's not much attempts from submission perspective. She's not throwing her legs up for an armbar or a triangle. She's not looking to stand back up to her feet. It's almost like she just accepts the position, especially when her opponent is so much better in the ground, in the world of grappling and BJJ, which is where Tabatha Ricci is much, much better. Once Tabatha Ricci gets takedowns in this fight, I think from that point, she'll settle Oliveira at some point on her back. She'll either finish Oliveira on the mat, or she'll see that round out, win the round, and then just rinse and repeat for the next round, and then the next round after that. It's really difficult to see how Oliveira gets through 15 minutes in this fight without being taken down for at least 2 rounds, and it's also really difficult to see her knocking Tabatha Ricci out, which is probably her biggest path to victory at this point, a path to victory that I don't think happens throughout the fight. So for those reasons, I'm picking Tabatha Ricci to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Khama versus Jai Herbert. I really like this fight. I think it's got all the makings of being a barn burner, being fireworks. You've got Khama that doesn't throw too much volume, but the punches that he does throw are very clean combinations, 2 to 3 punch combinations. Whereas Jai Herbert, he doesn't really pack much power behind his punches at all, but he's an absolute sniper. He'll throw volume, it's straight down the pipe. He's got a good 1-2, a good jab, a good straight punch down the middle as well. And overall, the work rate of Jai Herbert on the feet is just something else. He's got good cardio, good movement, constantly on his toes, in and out of range. He's a really, really fun fighter to watch. And although he doesn't have that one-hitter-quitter sort of power, he does have power through accumulation of volume. Once he starts becoming too much to handle inside the cage and his punches are so accurate and he starts hurting his opponents, he can get to the stage where he's closing the distance on them, landing elbows as well, and ultimately just making his opponents turtle up against the cage, which can lead to that TKO if the referee doesn't like how his opponents are defending themselves. He's got to be careful in this fight, Jai Herbert. I think the line's a little bit too wide as well. Jai Herbert's around a -180 favourite. I do think that should be shorter. And that's purely just because Khama does pack that power. He's going to be aggressive. It's whether Jai Herbert can back Khama off. If he can get Khama on his back foot for the majority of the fight, then he's going to do really good work in this fight, Jai Herbert, because Khama is definitely more of a forward pressure type of fighter, front foot type of fighter, likes to be the one being aggressive, bullying his opponent and pushing them back so he can get his reads in, get his distance management, get his range right and start landing combinations. Without that, if he is starting to be the one moving backwards, especially when it's Jai Herbert moving forwards, gauging the range, Jai Herbert's long. Like I said, the straight punches down the middle, down the pipe, definitely suit his style. I think that Jai Herbert in that scenario is going to be able to do a lot of good work, but he's got to be careful of that punch coming back from Khama. Ultimately, I do think Khama probably got the slight edge, the upside in the finishing ability. He is the more likely fighter, in my opinion, to find that knockout. But I do think it's a low percentage outcome. I think Jai Herbert does good work in this fight, good speed, good movement, and I think he'll be able to take 2 out of the 3 rounds if he doesn't get Khama tired and finish him late. So I am picking Jai Herbert to win this fight. And in the final fight of the breakdown, we've got Laureano Staropoli versus Jamie Pickett. This fight should have happened a couple of weeks ago. It got pushed forwards to this card. So again, it's an interesting fight. I think the betting line is slightly too wide here. I do agree with Staropoli being the favourite for sure, but at -220, I think Pickett poses enough problems to make that line a little bit too wide. I think Pickett can be aggressive. The fight's more than likely going to take place on the feet, although I could see some wrestling from Staropoli. But Pickett isn't the easiest fighter to take down, and he can cause initial scrambles to work back up to his feet. If Pickett is taken down and is settled on his back again, that's a slightly different story. But Laureano Staropoli isn't, a BJJ wizard. He's not a BJJ ace that is going to be able to just completely dominate topside. Although I do think he has some advantages topside. The fight is, like I say, is more than likely going to take place on the feet, be won and lost on the feet. And Pickett's going to have his moments in this fight. I don't think it's going to be a whitewash. I don't think Staropoli holds the power to just go in there and just starch Pickett in round 1. I definitely think Staropoli is going to have to work for a victory here. But I do think the longer the fight goes on, the more Staropoli will be able to take over the fight if he hasn't done so early on. Pickett for me is a little bit limited in regards to his striking qualities, his technique. When you're comparing those skills and qualities to Staropoli, who is a lifetime striker, a good kickboxer, should be able to mix things up inside the cage. Like I said, I think at some moments in this fight, it could be quite close. I think Pickett's definitely going to have his moments, but ultimately, I think Laureano Staropoli is the better mixed martial artist, and he's also the better fighter in where this fight is likely going to be won and lost, which, as I've said a couple of times, is going to be in the striking department. So I'm picking Laureano Staropoli to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the new video breakdowns that we've got, the setup that we've got. And as always, if I've ever helped you win any money, if I've ever helped you win money from my analysis and my predictions, I'd really appreciate you liking the video, subscribing to the MMA Play 365 YouTube channel too. And remember, We have multiple packages on the MMA Play 365 website, which is MMAplay365.com. We've got a $1.99 dog of the week, which if it loses, it's got a money back guarantee on it, so you'll get your money back. And then obviously we've got all our betting hub picks as well, so that's recommended bets. We've got stuff for fun gamblers, people that like to just play the long shot accumulators, parlays, whichever region you're in, depends on what you call that. And then you've also got the official bets directly from myself as well. Again, that's MMAplay365.com. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.